Food addiction is a real thing. It's not just drugs and alcohol, gambling, porn, any of that stuff, or sex even. Food addiction is a really big problem. And there are lots of people that are so addicted to a particular type of food that most of the time they don't even notice what's triggering them to eat it because they've been doing it for so long. See, we mostly think that drugs and alcohol and gambling are addictions, but you can be just as addicted to food. Now, there's a few things that you could be addicted to that are very, very difficult to overcome simply because you cannot cut them out cold turkey from your life. Food, sex, love. You can't just cut those out and be a healthy person. You have to learn how to manage those feelings and build better coping skills, but also it's better if you don't want to have to constantly manage that for the rest of your life and be hyper vigilant with yourself. It's better to actually get to the root cause of the trauma and what caused it to begin with. Where was that? What was the seed of that issue? And where was that anger and hurt directed? And let's go back and heal it. And I have a story that I'm writing to illustrate that. And I'm not quite sure of the title yet, but it basically relates back to where we've all got these rocks that we've buried in our backyard. And then a whole nother classification of people are trying to manage that type of addiction through starvation and over exercising and becoming anorexic, right? Having an anorexic type of exercise routine that leads to anorexia. So when you work out really, really hard, when you run a marathon, when you do hard cardio, it's an appetite suppressant. And yet, sometimes when we go into trauma or when we're starting to feel some effects that we've already felt before, for instance, like maybe when you were a kid, you had some traumatic events happen to you. And frankly, I mean, all of us growing up, there's like some type of, traumatic feeling from growing up. But if it's a really, really good childhood, you probably grew up to manage it pretty well. And you learned some coping skills along the way. So you didn't grow up to be a traumatized adult. But a lot of people either didn't have a great childhood or they had a reasonable one, but they didn't learn any coping skills as they got older. And their parents taught them from a young age, oh, here, you're sad, here's a cookie. Oh, you're sad, you're hurt, here's a cookie, right? And so they constantly reinforced, oh, this is what we do to feel better, especially if their parents had done that with them. And so it becomes this like genetic thing. That's my favorite. Oh, well, obesity runs in my family. That's because you used food as the same coping mechanism that your parents used, that their parents taught them, and so on. And that's how it runs in your family. But it's not carried on a chromosome that says, I'm going to be obese, because the very, very few, extremely few cases under which somebody's obesity is actually genetic is we're talking like half of a 1% of the population of the country. So just ditch that idea right there. Because you use the same coping mechanisms, because you're using food as a coping mechanism like your parents did, then of course everybody's got the same coping mechanism, right? Everyone's doing the same thing. So what does that do? Let's say you did have some trauma and in your past, you needed to, when you were a child, you stuffed it down, you held back how you felt, you did not express yourself because you did not feel safe to do so. And therefore, at some point in the future, when you were able to make decisions for yourself about what food to eat, you chose the junk food, you chose the cookie, you chose the cupcake, you chose the bagel with cream cheese, you chose all of the kinds of foods that actually apply a lot of visceral belly fat to you. You chose them as soon as the feeling started to well up. And this probably started to hit after high school, when you were on your own, having to be an adult for the first time, and all the responsibility was on you. And yet all of these old feelings were starting to get triggered just through everyday life that you didn't have a better coping mechanism for. And so you ate this food, you felt better. Little reward cycle, right? It's completely reasonable how this happens. And I understand because I had one for a while myself when I was a child. And then I started learning how to take care of my body better once I became a personal trainer and when I was in college. And then when I got a master's in psychology, I learned that food addiction was actually a real thing. Some are boulders, rocks like this size, but they've all got hurt feelings around them. And then we just bury them and we bury them and we bury them with drugs and alcohol and food and sex and video games and overworking and all of that stuff. And so this is why living on a diet for the rest of your life doesn't work very long, because you can try really, really hard to say, well, I'm just going to be carnivore forever, or I'm going to be keto forever. And I completely welcome you to try to do that. And I'm not going to stop you. But I will tell you that at some point it does get to be exhausting. The restrictive dieting, saying, well, I'm just going to be carb restricted forever. Okay, but it's not the carb's fault. It's the way you treated it. It's now that you're afraid of this particular whole type of food. You're never going to get the micronutrients that potatoes produce or fruit produces, because you're completely afraid of gaining weight again. So all this does is help you carry around this neuroticism that I'm afraid of getting fat again. And I understand what that feels like, because I did that for a very, very long time. I'm afraid of getting fat again, so I'm not going to eat any carbs. And the more I worked through all of my feelings that were related back to why I gained that weight to begin with, the less I was afraid of eating the carbs. And so if you want to live a healthy life, and mind you, my blood work is phenomenal. I'll even share it with you. But if you want to lead a healthy life, live a life that doesn't force you to have to always think about what you're eating, then you want to deal with the emotional reason why you overate to begin with. And it's not your fault. This isn't a shaming thing. There isn't something for you to feel guilty about. This is something for you to feel relieved about, that you can be free of this and you don't have to live that way. And you can be happy and healthy with great biomarkers and great longevity. And you can be healthy and never have to think about it again. So to share with you, what I'm getting at is I calculate my macros for my clients a very specific way. And I've been eating this way for 30 years. So I started training when I was 19. I'm 48 now. I'm going to be 49 in January. It is November of 2024 as I record this. And so 30 years I've been eating a very specific way. And it's been lowish land animal fat. So land animal fat is the chicken skin, it's the ribeyes, it's sausages, it's bacon, it's cheese, it's full fat dairy, it's all of that stuff. Now, there's a whole lot of people that will tell you, and butter, a whole lot of people that will say, no, those are good fats. And I'm not saying they're bad, but I am saying that they will prevent you from getting as lean as you would probably like to get. And those fats contribute to LDL increasing and triglycerides increasing. Now, avocado, really good for you. Olive oil, coconut oil, those are types of fats that are really, really beneficial. Your body needs certain types of fatty acids in order to be able to function properly. And those types of oils actually improve your HDL. No one's arguing that HDL is a bad thing. Everyone agrees that high HDL is important. In fact, one of the best ways to tell if you have a great metabolism and you're metabolically healthy, which also means your chronic disease risk is extremely low, is when you take your triglycerides, you divide it by your HDL. And if that number is under 1, you're doing great. If it's between 1 and 2, you're doing good. If it's between 2 and 4, you need to get on making some improvements very quickly. And if it's above 4, I would call that a state of emergency, and you need to make some drastic changes very fast. Problem is, if you're over a 4, you're probably not going to be able to make drastic changes very fast. So if I were you, I would be right on top of this and make sure that you don't go above a 2. And if you're already over 2, let's start making some changes so that you can get back below that before it continues to increase and cause some major metabolic stress. Here's the other part of why the whole addiction thing is important. Not only is it psychologically important, but whatever that anxiety, fear is that's going on in the back of your mind that you don't even necessarily register, because as soon as you start to feel this emotion come up, you already go and eat the thing that's going to help bring that anxiety down because you've trained yourself to be so vigilant about it. But anxiety, fear, these types of emotions, they actually cause the mitochondria in your neurons to dump their DNA and excrete cortisol. This is incredibly important because we used to think that cortisol only came from the adrenal glands. There is an entire field called psychobiology now. I didn't know this until earlier this year. That was even a thing. If it had been a thing when I was doing my undergrad, I certainly would have gone into psychobiology instead of just biology. But be that as it may. I had biology undergrad. I have a master's in counseling psychology. So I got my psychobiology anyway. But now we actually understand the mechanism by which our brains impact our metabolism. It slows it down. It completely starts to degrade the metabolism. And there are a lot of factors that integrate together. There's a lot of variables that contribute to a metabolic function. It is not simply just calories in, calories out. While that may be the end result of this massive set of calculations, it's a massive set of calculations. It's not addition and subtraction. It is figuring out what your basal metabolic rate is will take a couple of days in a metabolic chamber in order to completely calculate that and determine that. Anything else is a best guess right now, but it doesn't actually matter where your metabolism is right now as much as it matters where it's going. So I always make calculations based on my clients' goals. Where are we going, not where are we at right now, because then we'll constantly have to recalculate and recalculate. So what we really want to do is get into the habit of eating for the body that we want to have, rather than for the body that we have right now, and then right now, and then right now, as we make progress, because then you'll always just stair step. And it'll take a lot longer to get where you want to go because fat loss is not linear anyway. So all of that being said, if you find that you have gained more than, let's say, 20 pounds and you're struggling to lose it, there's probably a long-term element of something emotional in the background that you're using food to help soothe those emotions. And it's okay. There's no shame in that. I just wanted to give you the answer as to why these diets don't work. I've had more than one client come to me and say, well, I went to go see this coach, or I went to go see that trainer, or this nutritionist, I went on that program, this program, blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the day, I couldn't stay on it. Well, why couldn't you stay on it? Well, it just wasn't sustainable. Was it a really extreme diet? That's what I always ask. Was it like keto or carnivore or veganism? No, it was just high protein, or it was this or that. I was like, okay. So there's more to the story here. Now, it's not just about controlling appetite that we need to have for weight loss. If that were the case, then Ozempic would be all we ever need, and those peptides. But that's not it. And you can't live on those forever because they do have side effects. And the gastrointestinal ones aren't the only side effects. One of my clients saw his cholesterol go up. And I'm watching his food every day, so I know it wasn't what he was eating. His cholesterol actually went up with Ozempic. So we went off of it and we went to a different peptide, and he's getting great results now. So not every peptide is going to have the same side effects. Some peptides are going to be really, really helpful in getting rid of the visceral fat around our belly, that really hard fat that makes you look like you just swallowed a watermelon. That we can get rid of peptides as long as we're also putting in place the other lifestyle factors that are necessary to maintain it. But I will tell you this, no matter what. So you've got this behavior that's the lifestyle factors. You've got these hormones that Ozempic actually helps with, or, the peptides that it helps regulate the hormones, the GLP hormones. Before, what precedes hormones or what affects our hormones are our feelings. Like the anxiety and fear and all of that I talked about. And where do those feelings come from? Our thoughts, our beliefs about something that's happening in our lives and what that's going to mean to us. If we can get to the root problem, which is the way we think about a thing, we will completely change our reality without having to change anything else. It'll happen naturally, just like when you tip over a domino and everything else falls after the fact. Changing your thoughts is the more permanent way of getting those results to stick. And I can tell you over the last 30 years, I tried changing my behavior. Then I tried working on my hormones. And then I realized it all came back to my thought process and what I think about myself and what I think about what my body's capable of and what I think about life and what I think about what these other people are thinking about me and all of these other assumptions that I had made along the way. And that was for just a fairly normal person, right? Imagine if I had had some real extreme trauma in my childhood that I was trying to avoid. So keep in mind that your thoughts completely dictate what happens with showing up on your body. And when we change our thoughts, we can completely change our life.